Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fresche Talks. This is a 30-minute rapid-fire Q&A discussion. Today, we are talking about the topic of IBM data to AI-ready analytics. So what does that mean, and how do you unlock the data you already have across your systems to get your IBM data AI-ready for whatever comes next? So our three speakers for today are Tobias. We have Steve Cass joining us from UK, representing Europe. We also have Steve Micah on the Fresche Analytics business side. So gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. And for those of you that are joining us, we want to make this an interactive discussion. So if you have questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to drop those into the question box. There's a little square box with a question mark in it. Drop your questions in there, and we'll do our best to bring those up to the panelists to address as they go through. So with that, we're just going to jump right into our first question for Steve Cass. Every vendor we talk to says they make data AI ready in quotation marks. What does that actually mean in plain language? If you want to go ahead and set the scene for us today.
Thanks, Drew, and thanks everyone for joining us today. So I guess the important thing is all of us have data. We've got data in raw format, particularly if we're coming from an IBM database. That's often going to be a system that we've been running for a long period of time, and we've been accumulating that data over potentially many years of running the system. So we've got the data, it exists, but is it AI ready? And I guess the kind of questions we're asking there is, is it clean? Is it fit for purpose? Is it organized? We see a lot of unstructured data, particularly where that's grown over a kind of topsy-turvy as the system's been added to over many years. Is it accessible? IBM we talk a lot about proprietary database, DB2 We talk a lot about IBM as an operating system being a kind of closed shop. So, vendors that can help you to access that data that's behind that kind of proprietary layer, that's an important part of the topic. We need to be able to trust the data. We need to be able to trust the vendor that they're processing or accessing the data appropriately with us. And it's got to be usable by AI models. So to be AI ready, the data has to look and be structured in a way that's clean, reliable, trusted, and available for those AI models to work through. And that's basically the activity that Fresche do with our analytics team to make your data AI ready so you can use it in the AI context and do the analysis and gain the insights that you're looking for from that data. Hopefully that kind of sets the scene a little bit. I'm more than happy for Steve, Micah, and Tobias to jump in with any further commentary they have on that topic.
You just about covered what I would have explored. Tobias, do you have anything to add?
I think just it's key, of course, when we're talking about AI ready data, there's two things that I see in real life use cases that are key. In addition to what Steve talked about, it's often important to bring in additional data from other data sources as well. Our business typically will have other data such as our CRM system that may live in Salesforce or HubSpot, be able to tie that together, and the ability to add context and metadata to the data. So if we have IBM DB2 databases, the fields and table names are often not sufficient to be able to run and train models on directly. So we'll want the ability to attach descriptions and longer field names to the data. So in many cases, those two elements mean that the best way to grant AI access to your data is to synchronize that data into a data warehouse. A modern cloud-based data warehouse is several on the market, of course, as you all know, that work well for that. But having real-time synchronization with the data to a place where you can provide additional context and metadata and governance to the data is often the right path. And that's where we see our customers really being able to unlock access to the data through AI systems.
Yeah, it's a good point, Tobias, because historically, of course, many of these systems have grown up where 8 characters or 10 characters were the maximum lengths you could assign to field names. I mean, ultimately, DB2 is not a fully referential database. It doesn't have that kind of integrity layer that something like SQL would have. So you do have that challenge, as you say. It's got to be prepared to be used for AI. It's not automatically ready for you just to slot straight into the model and off you go. There's some cleansing to do.
Yeah, Steve Cass, that's a good transition to our next question that we have here. We've been talking about modernizing our IBMI data access for years. Where do we actually start without blowing up what already works?
Yeah, and it's an important topic, Drew, because nobody wants to throw away the baby with the bathwater, right? We want to move into this modern AI technology space. We want to be part of that era of AI, but we've got our legacy, or legendary, I think is becoming quite a popular term now, database, which we've been storing data in for many, many years. We don't want to be in a position where we have to change the programs or the functionality to allow us to use the data in this particular way. So we do have that option where we can modernize database tables. Tobias has already said, some of the modernization activities that we would do, moving towards long table names, for example, long field names, column descriptions, the ability to be able to query the data. So that's adding or augmenting to our existing DB2 data without us necessarily having to change the structure of the data or the attributes of the data. So we're augmenting it, adding additional metadata around that data structure to allow us to make use of it without, as you put it in the question, without blowing up what already works, because that would be disastrous.
Yeah, and to add to that, we've been having a lot of conversations lately around, migration as that modernization path. And oftentimes when you're looking at a thing like migrating off platform, you're looking at an extremely expensive and risky endeavor, significant impact to the business. And with most modern data platforms, they're building around this idea that you can be multi-cloud, you can be on-prem, you can bring in multiple data sources of disparate nature into the same place and harmonize that data so you can leverage it for BI and AI. And I think that's an area we really want to emphasize. It's not just you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You don't have to think about migration, because a lot of the decades of effort that have been put into building mission critical applications and database activity, you don't need to rip and replace. You can bring that data out into a cloud-based environment and leverage the latest and greatest in AI tools without having that massive risk on the business.
And as a reminder, if you have a question, please feel free to drop that into the question box. Steve Cast, we have another question here. Our IBMI system runs the business. How risky is it to connect it to modern tools? Could we break something?
Okay, so first of all, well done for having IBMI running the business. You're in good company, because many major financial and industrial institutions globally are using IBMI to run their business. How risky is it to connect to modern tools? Well, I mean, I'd be loath to say there is no risk, because there's always a risk in any kind of project that you're engaging in this kind of thing. But we're not impacting the underlying business. We're not impacting the production capability of the system. That's one of the key things we're trying to make sure of. That day-to-day operation, day-to-day management is not impacted by the analysis that we're undertaking on that data. So with the right vendor and the right tools and the right governance of the project, you're not going to break anything. That's not where the risk is. So yeah, I would say how risky? Minimal is the answer to that question.
And Tobias, I wanted to ask you a question on that. From what you're seeing when we're talking about real-time replication of data out of the IBMI, are you seeing serious risk or at least bogging down mission critical systems on the IBMI by pulling that data out in real time?
We're seeing Of course, there's always some level of overhead when we're doing data replication, but we're seeing the approach that we're seeing the most success with is a journal-based data replication, where every insert, update, delete, and other table data operations trigger an event to be shipped out to a connected database, and we're seeing fairly limited overhead from those processes because they're being processed as the records are updating. We're seeing fairly limited impact, but there's always an overhead with any sort of real-time replication, of course.
Yeah. And many customers, I guess, will have a kind of replication tool that's running anyway for their disaster recovery, the high availability, and so on. So this is no more of an overhead than those existing tools that they will be running, and therefore adds no more risk than those existing tools.
Exactly right.
Looks like we have another question here. Steve Cast, does Presto have an AI layer? Can we talk about that?
Ooh, okay, that's an interesting question. Honest answer is yes, but maybe not in the way that you think. So Presto obviously is our UI modernization tool, used really effectively by many customers to reface their legacy or legendary IBM I applications, moving away from green screen. A lot of that is done via kind of templates, and also the ability for the customer to design the look and feel of the application when they want to run in a browser. You can augment the green screen application with additional functionality, and that's where the AI piece comes in. So, for example, I think customers using Presto to add chatbots in a context, for example. So being able to query the data with Gen AI, with natural language processing. So that's a possible Presto AI connection. Presto can also add a reporting layer in, so you could visualize the data, and again, you could use different AI tools to connect Presto to that data visualization and understanding. Tobias, I've probably got more experience than me when it comes to data visualization, but Presto can certainly connect through to that.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add on the Presto side.
No problem. All right, hopefully we answered the question there. Do put more detail in if you'd like us to be more specific.
All right, we've got another question related to MCP servers. Let me pull that up on the screen. Whoever wants to tackle this, maybe Tobias, do you have a productized MCP server or connector for IBM I that exposes RPG COBOL programs, DB2 for I tables, and job/spool data as callable tools? Or is this still something you'd build custom per client today?
Yeah, so we have a productized MCP server. That what an MCP server is it's an AI ready way to make the data visible to any AI agent. So whether you're using a GPT agent or Copilot or Claude or anything else, the most natural way to expose data to an AI agent is through an MCP server. In most cases, as I mentioned earlier, you'll want to be able to combine data both from your IBM I and other data sources. You'll want to be able to add context to the data as you're exposing it. So our standard approach is a real-time replication, where we have products for that we offer as Fresche. We synchronize that real-time to a cloud-based data warehouse, bring in any other data, and then an MCP server that reads the structure, ingests all of that metadata, and exposes that to chat agents. We see customers moving from building and publishing reports to being able to interact with authoritative, curated, secure data directly through chat agents and going from reports to questionnaire and answer sessions and being able to build live analysis. And I've been in data and analytics for the last 20 odd years. We've always promised that as an industry that we can do self-service analytics. And I think for the first time, I'm seeing wide adoption of AI tools that really truly does deliver self-service analytics to customers. There's several products and approaches that you can take to that. But what I would say as a foundation, whether you work with us, another vendor, or another product, bringing the data into one governed layer, a data warehouse or a data lake, and then attaching MCP servers and exposing the data in a secure and governed way through that is an architecture that is the way that the industry is going, and I think it's a good choice. So look for that as you're looking to deploy AI directly on your data with authoritative and governed sources.
100% agree with that, Tobias. I'm just going to pick up the bit about RPG and COBOL and job and spool file data as well. So we announced this week that our flagship product at Fresh, the X Analysis AI tool, now has MCP capability. That'll be available for customers currently working on X Analysis AI or X2E analysis. And that very much uses the MCP server to understand and expose your RPG and COBOL programs, the structure of the code, the logic, the business rules, etc., all accessible through MCP server and therefore consumable in VS Code or Bob, IBM Bob, etc. And job and spool data, MCP connections, that's watch this space. There is an announcement to be made fairly soon around operational AI capabilities for IBM I.
There's another question from the chat. Is there a need to have a technical person on staff to explain the current iSeries DB2 database formats?
Well, maybe I'll answer quickly and then Tobias and Steve pick up with other comments. But the simple answer there is it helps to have a technical person on staff to explain the current database formats, particularly if you're using things like program described files or multi-member physical files, for example. That can be quite complicated. So it's helpful to someone here that can explain how that's working in your environment. But if you don't have such a person, that's fine. We have tools and methodologies that cope with the situation where there are no longer technical team members available to answer those questions. So again, I mentioned a reference X analysis earlier. That's a great tool for understanding a DB2 database without need for any technical handover or transfer of knowledge from your technical team. But Tobias and Steve live and breathe that, so maybe they have a comment as well.
I mean, I think it's one of the challenges, right? When you have a technology where you haven't that's been around long enough and hasn't been what the kids have been running to for a couple of years, right? Is that organizations have to deal with the challenge of our main operational system doesn't necessarily have an influx of lots of young people. You either have to have people on staff that understand it well, or you have to work with a vendor that provides that expertise for you. There's no way around it. And that probably makes inherent sense to everybody on the call. So I'll leave it at that.
And whenever we move forward with customers, it's always a close relationship with both IT and the business, and that relationship with the business helps develop the understanding along with our expertise.
All right, question for Steve Micah. How do you see the dynamics of analytics shifting in this AI era?
That's an interesting question. I have seen a pretty rapid shift. It always seemed like analytics and engagements meant to really focus on cleaning data and consolidating data. We're almost always IT driven. And what I've seen a massive shift in with AI is that a lot of the leadership is now pushing for modernization and leveraging AI tools. A lot of that time that edict comes down without much clarity. They just want AI for AI's sake. But I think the benefit from an IT perspective is that we're finally getting the attention necessary. And the story that I'm consistently telling leadership is that BI and AI, analytics and AI, are intrinsically linked. If you think that you're simply going to start deploying AI tools and alleviate all the issues with clean data, confidence in data, and that will be some magic bullet, it's simply not. And so my hope is that we continue to see that investment in IT and investment in analytics as a cornerstone of successful AI deployment. Because in every AI deployment I've personally seen, focusing on data as the first step was always the path that led to the most success.
All right, it looks like we also have a follow-up question on the previous MCP server. So pulling this up on the screen now. Is the MCP server read-only against the replicated data, or can it write back to the IBM system? And if it can write, does that go through the replication layer or a separate path back to the source?
What the productized MCP server that we have right now is read-only by design. We have one large client where we're doing write back as well, but that's not an off-the-shelf product that we have that requires a careful governance layer that ensures that we govern who can write back, what are the structures that we're writing back through. It often has to pass through the application layer, writing from an MCP server directly to the database. We have to do validation, whether that's provided by the program or whether that's provided by the MCP server. It is open. You can do either, but if you already have a program layer that does that validation, it's advisable to utilize that. Still, this is often part of a modernization where you might leave the database on-prem, shift the programs to Java, for example, in which case you'll expose those programs through APIs, and the MCP server will call those APIs to write back to the DB2 database. But it's something that you really have to ensure that layer of governance and validation and application logic sits on top of any write backs to the DB2 database. So it's certainly possible. We're doing that. Just it's not something that you should allow direct write back without careful consideration to the DB2 database.
To add to that, the challenge, I guess, is often with an IBM system, the constraints within the database are not often stored at the database table structure. They're stored in the program layer. So what good data looks like, the validation of that data is often in the RPG or COBOL or Java, whatever language using code base. And that, as Tavir says, that means that really what you want is a structured program that you can put the data back in and check that it's valid data as part of that write back process.
Great questions coming through in the chat. We've got about just over 5 minutes left, so we've got time for a few more questions. Let's talk about broader, how are companies bridging the gap between IBM and modern APIs or cloud platforms today?
I'll jump in, guys. I mean, in lots of different ways. Probably too many in the 5 or 6 minutes we've got left to describe in detail. But the important thing, maybe, to answer that question with is that this is possible. This is something you can do. There is no reason why you can't connect the data and application you're running on IBM with any modern API or cloud platform. That hybrid model is entirely possible. It's entirely within budget. There are tools and vendors like Fresh that can enable this for you. So if the question is how, use the tools and vendors that are available. If the question is can you do this, then the answer is a firm yes, you definitely can.
Yeah.
Got another good question in the chat here about security. Security. How do we protect PII and PHI? Great question. Who wants to take a stab?
Well, I think Tobias is going to hammer on this, and this is why we really recommend leveraging a governed layer for your data, where you have access controls, security controls built in. Tobias, I know you have a lot of comments on this, so I'll let you continue.
Certainly. So it depends how, like from what angle. I'm assuming you're coming at it from the analytics angle of how do we provide AI access to data and still manage PII and PHI access and governance. So number one is you have to log all of the tool calls you hear. That's one thing in an MCP server that I strongly advise is, and that's the approach that we always take, right? Make sure that you can see who has called the MCP server, what objects that they've accessed, and you have complete logs of that. Number two, you have to have anytime that you're dealing with PII and PHI, you have to have a governance oversight owned by a chief data officer role within your company. If you're a smaller company, that's generally owned by a shared function in IT or finance. If you're a large organization, that's a dedicated person. But so much of that comes down to process as much as technology. Technology supports it, but the process is crucial. But as far as protecting it, my belief is that ensuring that there's good governed access to PII and PHI and company data is crucially important. If you do not provide a governed access layer, what happens is that users export the data into Excel and they share that data or run analysis directly on the data. You have no clue what's happening. That's why actually providing access to the data in a governed way is the most important step in being able to do any sort of governance. Otherwise, you have no idea about how and where the data is used, because your users will need to make decisions based on that data.
Yeah, and just to add to that, we work in healthcare quite often, and we see customers come to us frequently who have significant issues with accidental HIPAA violations, kind of running through the exact scenario Tobias just walked through. So very, very important when you're thinking about, from an IT perspective, how you're delivering AI tools. There's also this kind of world of shadow IT that's existing through most organizations right now, where if there aren't governed AI tools available, they're just using ChatGPT or they're using Claude, publicly hosted. All that data is going up and training the models. It is the wrong path to take. So it is, again, why we highly suggest, moving forward with an organizationally adopted AI tool that is built on governance and built on security as the first layer, the first thing that you're thinking about when you're deploying an AI tool. Otherwise, folks are just going to go off and use their own tools in an ungoverned manner.
Absolutely. Please don't let them do that. Back to the original question as well, making data AI ready. So that governance question is certainly part of making your data ready. So.
All right, we've got time for we've got about 30 seconds left. We've got time for one last question. We'll try and squeeze this in here. Do you need a dedicated server to run the data access to the DB2I series?
It depends what you mean by that, but I'm going to assume that you're talking about the real-time replication into a data warehouse with this question. There's multiple different approaches to it. There's different tools on the market. A lot of them requires an additional runtime and x86 or something like that where you're running. What we are providing as Fresh runs on platform and does the journal processing and journal shipping to the data warehouse. from the IBM itself, so there's no dedicated additional server to manage that replication into the analytics data layer. So you don't need it. Some tools utilize it, our tools don't, but there's multiple different approaches to it.
Well, I'm going to cheekily jump in as well, if I may, and just say there was another quick one about someone saying same question earlier on Presto for Catapult and Formtastic. Just really quickly to say that Fresche are AI enabling all of our tools. So the answer is yes. AI first is our policy for the tools.
Excellent. Thank you, Steve Cass, Steve Micah, Tobias. I think we're at time. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. If any of those questions weren't addressed, we'll be sure to reach out to you. And also stay tuned for our next Fresche Talks, where we will be addressing the topic of cloud security. So stay tuned for announcements on that. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.